Greetings and blessings to each of you as we continue our journey through this long, green Pentecost season. In today's Gospel from Matthew, we are reminded that some forms of wisdom cannot be obtained by working ourselves into a state of weariness. In addition, it seems that knowledge of God cannot always be achieved through excellence of effort or perseverance. I don't know about you, but this perspective turns my normal ways of being and doing in the world upside down. Jesus, to be sure, of course, his words catch me off guard so often. What might it mean if through hard work and our impatience we miss the point of Jesus? Can I really reconcile my own need to get it right with the need to become more childlike in my faith? And then in verses 28 through 30, we find an invitation to which these passages have been built. Come to me, all who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. A wonderful metaphor. When Jesus worked as a carpenter, he likely made his harnesses as part of his daily work. I like to imagine this. It is reassuring to think of him carefully fitting the yoke or harness so that it would fit just right, and bear the burden of the plow. I can see him sanding the rough spots, carefully fitting the yoke, making it a perfect complement to the task at hand. Similarly, I like to think that Jesus knows each of us by name. He knows our gifts, he knows our needs, and yes, he knows our broken parts of ourselves. He does not want us to be weighed down or so worried that we cannot do the good work that Jesus calls us to do. I'm reminded of the need to constantly let go and embrace a new life and a new spirit that is already ours. This process is less about becoming someone or something new than it is becoming more authentic, the authentic person that we already are. This kind of becoming includes the shadow parts of ourselves we prefer to deny and we don't like very much. I believe that it was Father Francis Rohr who said something to the effect that the primary task of our lives is to grieve appropriately, remain quick to recover, and embrace the new normal. So how hard will it be, given what is happening during this pandemic or this national turmoil that we presently find ourselves? Can we effectively overcome doubt and allow the Holy Spirit to be our comforter and the source of our strength and wisdom? We face many losses, many death experiences in our lives. The choice is ours, whether those losses will smother the Spirit or the choice to allow the Spirit to open us to new life. Further, we must not let fear change us, to keep us in bondage. I wish I could say that I've never been fearful, but that would not be true. But I'm still trying to let go. I'm still trying to let God. When I was growing up, my maternal great-grandmother, Elizabeth, lived on a small farm in West Virginia. After my great-grandfather died in 1950, Elizabeth cared for the farm until late in her life. It is Elizabeth whose face I often see when I imagine God. She always welcomed me into her sacred presence. She taught me, as a child, the rudiments of the faith. Childlike faith. It was not doctrine that she taught me. It was her spiritual practices and her spiritual way of being. Elizabeth was someone who could let go and let God, even when painful things happened in her life. Her faith and unconditional love was a constant. She created an atmosphere of trust and faith. It amazes me when I think about my great-grandmother Elizabeth. Her memory brings to mind her faithful witness and still gives me confidence in the promises of Jesus. I clearly remember as a small child the outward and visible signs of my great-grandmother's love, her wisdom, and her faith and loving ways contributed to the person that I am today. As a child, I remember that freshly baked apple pie was always waiting for us the first day I arrived with my grandmother for our annual summer visit. As a youngster growing up, I could not imagine a world without her. When I take pause, I remember her. It gives me a sense of peace and gratitude that I carry with me to this very day. Elizabeth's compassion and love are gifts to me. Her witness, as well as the gifts of so many who taught and mentored me, renewed the gift of the Spirit in various stages of my life. And as I remember my great-grandmother and the influence of her wisdom and love, I can close my eyes. I can see her dark red hair, her sparkling eyes, and her beautiful wrinkled facial skin. It feels as if she is looking at me. She's looking at me as I am right now. And her gentle love for me and my family, she would not live to see. I am so grateful for that feeling. I also visualize her as she was then, handing me as an elderly grandfather today, a freshly baked piece of apple pie. Given these types of memories, I can make various connections in my life today. The memories have created a process of growth that continues to shape me as a person. For example, it was Elizabeth that gave me a sense of spiritual curiosity to want to grow as a person of faith. This in turn led me to find a particular congregation where I confirmed my faith and I received my first communion. When we all recall the story of our lives, our loves, yes, our losses, our failures, and our triumphs, we return again and again to the deep narratives of our lives that shape us as persons. And when we identify them and revisit them, we learn from them. And it is doing it that reduces anxiety and misgivings. But it also can develop courage and compassion within us. When I think of those past experiences, it takes me back in time and space to listening to the sacred stories of Elizabeth, to that first Eucharist when Jesus shared it with his disciples. It also brings to me the precise moment when I ponder God's love for you and for me and all those who have gone before us. It seems my memories of my early past brings me to this moment in time. I look to you, St. Thomas, as I write these words, and I can hear Jesus' familiar and comforting words being spoken. Yes, I'm not the same person who heard these words before. I remember Elizabeth reading them to me as a child. But I'm beginning to see them again in a new wisdom, a wisdom that Jesus seems to describe in Matthew chapter 11. Quote, "To what will I compare this generation? It is like children sitting in the marketplaces and calling me and one another. We played the flute for you, and you did not dance. We wailed, and you did not mourn." I recall the words of Bob Dylan, who, by the way, won a Nobel Prize in Literature. He reminds me with these words, quote, "I was so much older then. I am younger than that now." Each day brings new uneasiness for all of us with this kind of virus that continues to kill thousands, tens of thousands of lives. And yet there's also another virus. Another virus called racism that seems to be taking apart our country. I am fearful that the political divide will diminish our democracy. It seems that our nation is terminally ill, and I wonder what it will bring to my children and my grandchildren. What will it bring? And yet, in spite of all this, Jesus tells us not to be afraid, and that he will give us rest to our souls. I pray so. We may not always be sure where we're going, and even if we can keep on going. But then, as William Barry said, quote, "It may be that when we no longer know what we do, we have come to a real work. And when we no longer know which way to go, we will begin a real journey." The mind that is not baffled is not employed. The impeded stream is one that sings, end quote. Don't be afraid. Come to me, all of you who are weary and are carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble of heart, end quote. These were words of courage for his beloved at the moment when God was about to do a new thing. Come for those who are weary and who are often fearful. Cling to the words that bring courage and hope to you. Be mindful of all of God's beloved words uttered throughout Scripture by the prophets, poets, angels, and yes, Jesus himself. Words spoken whenever God was about to do a new thing. We are encouraged. We are encouraged to be unafraid. Even in the face of that new thing that we do not yet quite perceive. That new thing that will inevitably draw us from the security of the familiar, because God has given us Jesus and has given us one another. It is God's Spirit working as our advocate in our lives, in this place, in the here and the now. Together, brothers and sisters, we can do this hard thing. Whatever it may be, we can do it without fear. After all, we move on a sacred, living, and faithful promise.